Welcome to part 2 of the A-level algebraic fractions, and we're going to start with something a little bit more complicated than we did last time. You notice we have a couple of things on the bottom, but what it will really do well is for us to think of these as whole numbers. So to do that, we put brackets around them, and that will allow us to treat them as a contained thing rather than a couple of things. And thankfully, what we did last time still applies here. We're going to find a common denominator. In this case, we still have unknowns, and so it works like before. We multiply them together, and this is different only because they're bigger and more awkward to write. It means we're going to need more space. So I move quite a lot of space here, and when the questions get bigger, this is especially important. So this is what we have already, and we know that the denominator, well, in the old question, we just put our little working here, what we multiplied it by. In this case, it's a bit impractical to go around writing all of that. And I'll do it once, just to see. Now we want y minus 2. And we'll do the same to the top. See how that gets a little bit too awkward. Once you do enough practice of this, you'll start to see that you don't need to do that. It's more about what you're missing. So on the bottom here, you're missing a y minus 2. So I'm just going to put y minus 2. And because I did that to the bottom, I'm going to do it to the top. You'll notice that I keep them in line. That's a really big +1 for your organization, and you'll know what you added second. Now we're moving on to the next one. Plenty of space. It's hard to judge how much space until you wrote the first one, so that's why I did it that way around. Now for this one, although the y minus 1 came first, it's the addition over this side. So I'm going to switch up. But remember, when two things are multiplying together, if I'm honest with you, I don't like the gap there. When things are multiplied together, it doesn't matter which order that they do it in, that they multiply in. Okay, so we can switch this round and it's still fine. I think most importantly, we have what we've added in line. And that's really going to make the difference to us feeling comfortable when we do the question. Okay, so next job is, now we've got a common denominator, we want to add the numerators together under this, or over, should I say, this denominator. And technically, we could do this all in one. I generally tend to, so we're going to expand at the same time. Because if you're A-level, you could do a few steps in your head. So multiplying this out, we're going to have on the top 5y subtract 10. Now you'll be very careful here when this is a negative, but it isn't here. So everything is okay and it won't affect both elements over here. They could just cause their own trouble. And that will now all go over our common denominator, which, like, it doesn't matter, but I'll just pick the one that's on the left. Maybe I want redemption at doing it properly. And then we simplify the top. It's probably a good time to start writing the equals sign in. So to simplify things, when it gets more complicated, this is even more important, but we can circle the like terms with specific shapes. In this case, we have 8y and negative 13, and then we're going to put that all over our denominator, and you're wishing or hoping it will cancel, but unfortunately that's it. When these fractions get more complicated, you will get used to it. They just look complicated, and that's done. The only way that you cancel a fraction, algebraic one, is by factorizing, because you need a common factor on the top and the bottom. You can't do it any further here. It's fully factorized on the bottom, nothing in common there. Okay, so let's take a look at a second question, which is a little bit more shocking than this one. Okay, so finger touched that a bit, but as you can see, this is a bit harder. You've got 3 elements here. Really what this means is we need more space. Like, won't take too much extra in terms of our methodology. It's fairly similar. just more complicated, so be careful and organized. And some of the things we've seen already will help us keep organized. So let's give ourselves a lot of space for the first one. We don't know what that's going to need, but let's put the first one to gauge. Okay, so I think we're going to need about that much space. That should fit 3, just thinking ahead. And we'll continue with the principle that you need to add what you're missing. So we've got a z plus 1, and for this to be a common denominator, we still multiply them all together, which means that these two are going to have to be put here and multiplied. I'm trying to keep tight with space. It would be nice to just spread out, but I know I'm going to need it. Now, what I just added goes on top. Simple as that. And look at me put in a little line on the z, because there are 2's around here, so the little z has a line, and that's quite important sometimes. Not if you don't want to go back and retrace your steps. Let's do the same for the second one. Is a plus, which is a plus. I know it's a plus, which means it can just be as it is, which is great. And you should get pretty quick at this eventually. So we've got a y plus z, and we're missing z plus 1 from over there, and the surrounding y minus 1. We need a bit more extra, so just extend slightly. More space on top. Now this is where I have to be careful a bit later on, so ensuring that we've got a 6. Now, I always put this one first. Remember the one that was already there? Because then if you look, they're in line, what you've added, and I feel like that's just that extra layer of organization that helps you double check that you've got everything. Okay, now it's a tough job of expanding brackets, but we need to be careful because on the top, well, let's start by saying these denominators are all the same now. So let's just focus on the top and adding it together. And I'm not going to write all of those denominators out every time. I'm just going to do the top. So to deal with this first one, I will open a bracket after the 4 and expand the quadratic carefully. So I'm going to bring in, I'm going to do the y squared minus y. Yes, you will get quicker at this when you practice enough, and you won't need to draw the lines, but I always say in the exam, you're not yourself. You need to be careful. You need to have methods that allow you to make sure you don't miss things. Little mistakes always creep in, especially when you're stressed. Here's the first one. See what I did? Good chance to pause the video and do the other two. And what it would look like is this. And as you can see, I've been very careful to expand and put in brackets, and again, very good looking ahead with space. Now the job is to multiply what we call the coefficient, which is the number on the outside that multiplies. All these 4 elements are the same with this bracket, same with this bracket, and with this one. Once they're expanded, they look like this. And that's the magic of cameras for you. We have all of this done, but that's not too quick. It's quite slow if you do it properly. Being careful around the center. See how we can appreciate the Z with a line on it now, with all these 2's and Z's. And lastly, being careful that this -6 was going to change all of those signs to negative. And it's all about grouping terms now. So let's just say that the y squareds are in circles. We'll say that the y terms have this rotated square. Where else have we got a y? And it's just a matter of being very careful with these. Maybe we'll leave it at that and start writing it. Remember, this is just the numerator. And we've got a total of -4 plus 2, that's -2, and then -6. It's going to take us to -8y. And we'll just continue with the z's, the zy's, and the numbers, and the z squared, so there's 4 more sets. And once you've done that, it will look like this. lots of inventive ways to try and make sure that, you know, we have the correct notation here, because in the exam I'd love to use color, but you can't. So use these different signs, and got some squiggles, use the top rather than the bottom, arrows, dots, you know, get creative with it, whatever you can manage. The more space you have, the easier it is. Now these are the terms on the top, and it looks like there's nothing to be done. Yes, I hope you can see they're all even, and actually probably we can factor 2, but honestly, will that factor with our denominator over here? It won't do anything, so we'll just leave it as it is. And the last step is just to finally add in the denominator that we found earlier, because our mission has been accomplished. We wanted to combine these separate fractions at the top into one separate fraction. Later on in the A level, you're going to be going the other way around. So we first learn how to go from these separated fractions to here, and then we learn how to split them apart into what we call partial fractions up here, which is really useful for integration. Okay, we've come to the end now. I hope it really helped, and I think these were very useful questions to see that they're getting a bit harder, and they're definitely useful later. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing. I'd love to have you around and make more content for you.